It's time for the Phil Ferguson Show.
Hello, everybody. This is Phil Ferguson, and of course, you are listening to the cleverly titled Phil Ferguson Show. It is March of 2017, or apparently what we now call in the modern day spring. It has been surprisingly warm, and we actually had flowers in central Illinois start to bud in late February. So, yeah, spring is coming. The snow hopefully is all done for us, and hopefully it's all done for you soon as well, unless you're listening in the Southern Hemisphere, and then you know, of course, it might be coming for you. Other than that, we have been doing a lot of work on the house. Just yesterday, it was an amazing time. I had painters painting the inside of the house. I had a crew putting in brand new windows for the house. And I had landscapers putting in a little walking path from the driveway around to the side where the garbage cans go. So the new owners of our house, after we sell it, won't have to walk in the mud like I did. So it's one of those cases that we got a house that we knew needed some work, and we figured we would do that. And, you know, we got busy, and life happened, and the things that were issues weren't really that big. But now that we're putting the house on the market, hopefully in a week or so, we're fixing everything up, and fingers crossed, it will sell real fast. It's one of those things that I get to talk to people all across the United States on a regular basis with my job. And in the past, people would tell me stories of how awful it was to sell their house and how long it took and how many months it took. And matter of fact, 5 years ago, we sold our previous house, and it was on the market for 6, 8, 9 months, something like that. But now I hear stories from people that are selling houses in days. It is absolutely staggering, and hopefully I get to enjoy the same benefit from a strong economy. No, it wasn't caused by Trump, but we'll see how that goes in the future. Anyway, a little later on, we're going to talk to Phil Zuckerman. He is an author of several books on atheism and teaches classes on the subject, and he's a longtime activist in the movement and someone you probably should know, but I don't want to spoil the entire segment by telling you about it, so we're just going to let you listen to that after I get done with the investing skeptically part. And in case you're a new listener, and apparently I get more and more of those every week, thank you for joining us. Just a quick review. The show is about 1/3 finance and about 2/3 atheism and a little bit of whatever the fuck Phil wants to talk about. So that's kind of the agenda that we're going to do. And today we're going to talk a little bit about past performance. Specifically, we're going to expand on, I'm pretty sure it was show number 175. If it's not, let me know and I can correct it next show. I did an overview of 10-year performance and how your investments could have done based on a couple of different investment options. And if you're a regular listener to the show, you know it always gets a little to a lot sketchy when you start looking at past data. So keep that in mind. Now, some of this is just straight up performance numbers. So it's not sketchy at all because it's a fact. But when we start talking specifically about what things could be or could have been, keep in mind that I am in absolute control of history when I rewrite it, and it may not be the most accurate and reliable thing. Just, pointing out facts that they are. So we're looking at going from calendar year 2006 through the end of calendar year 2016, a total of 11 calendar years. And the reason I'm doing this is that this is a continuation of the 10 years that I did about 9 months ago. So maybe I'll do this every year. I don't know. It's just kind of fun to look at. But it kind of came up again because I get a lot of people talking to me about target date funds, and they work really well if you are adding money to them and you want a balanced portfolio. But I often have issues with them. One, because if you're 12, 15, 20 years or more from retirement, in my opinion, I think you should be pretty much mostly, if not all, in the stock market, either U.S. or domestic. And if long-term bond rates are really high, you can dabble in that too, like we did in the 2005, 2007 timeframe and a few years after that. But for right now, you should not have 10, 15, 20% of your money in short-term bonds if you're 20 years from retirement. So it all depends on your situation, and the target date fund is one basket, and you're going to get whatever it does, whether it's right for you or not. It's kind of like the old analog clock thing that's broken. A broken clock is right twice a day. So it's not horrible. So that's another thing that I get on a regular basis. If I talk about something not being optimal, it does not mean that I think it is horrible. You're not getting ripped off. This is not a variable annuity where you are getting ripped off. It's just not as good as you could do. So I wanted to look at a few options, and I did this before over the last 10 years, and today we're going to do it for the past 11 years. And so since I mentioned the target date fund, let's start with that. In our theoretical scenario, you have $1 million on January 1st of 2016, and every year you're going to take out 5% because you're in retirement. The $1 million after 11 years in the target date 2015 fund from Vanguard, even with taking out $50,000 a year, you will have $1,023,000. So definitely not bad. You did okay. And this was a time frame where the market has slightly underperformed the historical norm. So it's a representative sample. It's not like the late 90s where the market was making 25% per year. And it's not the time period from 99 to 2009 where we had two big drops. But it does cover 2008, which is the single biggest one-year drop of 37%. And the problem with the target date fund is while it may have a generous portion of your money in bonds, when, let's say, half of your portfolio is in the total market, that goes down 37%, and half is in the bonds, and let's say back in 2008 you made 4%, 37 and 4, you have a compound or an average return of about minus 16.5. So you have to sell your $50,000 out of that one fund. So you're forced to sell when there's a loss. If you have more options, you can be a little more flexible. So the next thing I'm looking at is a very, very simple thing to do. And this is where you have $1 million and you put 30% in the Vanguard Total Bond Market Index, 20% in the Total International, and 50% in the Vanguard Total Stock Market Index. Start with $1 million, and the trick with this one is you take the $50,000 out and you rebalance the entire portfolio exactly back to 30%, 20%, and 50%, as I just described, every year. Just once a year, not quarterly, monthly, or weekly, or daily, but once a year. And the end result after 11 years is that you have $1.17 million. So you have about $50,000 more than the target date fund. And that's because you were able to adjust. Now, if in that time frame bonds had done better or international had done better, you might have more money. Even if the U.S. stock market had done better, of course, it could all do worse. And you could have less than $1 million. And that's one of the reasons why you need a cushion at all, because there are some time periods where even over 10 or 11 years where the market is down. It's unusual, but it can happen. And so you want to have some protection. On the contrast, if you had just the total U.S. stock market, your $1 million, taking out $50,000 a year, becomes $1.34 million. So it had the best returns over the last 11 years compared to the other two options, which we would expect because the market's made 7.5%, 8% per year for the last 11 years. And a blended portfolio we would expect to make slightly less, especially with the bonds. So there's some examples. Now, if you take something like the total bond, the international and total stock, and you start breaking it down into more segments, and you also make adjustments from year to year depending on what is going on. And this is one of those things that I can have an honest debate with somebody about whether I do market timing. My position is that I do not do market timing, but I do market-based adjustments. So this is the part where I warned before we even started, and I'll re-warn again. I had to go back and try to recreate a theoretical portfolio based on what I remember doing 11 years ago. So this is not any one person's actual portfolio. This is not my portfolio. It's just meant to demonstrate how this could kind of sort of work, keeping in mind that I probably tricked myself and picked more optimal things because I'm looking at the data. I have the data. I have the knowledge of what has already happened. So keep that in mind. But let's just say back in 2006, instead of having all short-term bonds, you have a spread where you have short-term, intermediate term, and long-term. And, you did okay. It's the long-term bonds were paying 7% or more in dividends. And some years they made pretty good money. And we also had a skosh of high-yield bonds in there. And then, of course, you have different positions within the United States stock market. We have growth and value. We have large cap, small cap, mid cap. We have a little bit of everything because all of the parts of the U.S. market, and I break it up into 6 segments, and I call them segments, not sectors, because sectors often refers to something like energy or technology or banking. I don't do it that way. I don't think that has value, but I break it into segments. And there's 6 segments. There's growth and value. And then within growth and value, there's large, mid, and small cap. Capitalization, that means the size of the companies. And sometimes one or more of those segments will do well. And if you're in retirement, that's where you pull more money from. Sometimes one or two or more of those segments will do poorly. And if you're adding money, you're 10, 15 years from or more from retirement, that's where you add money. You add it where it's underperformed because I believe, and I think the data supports this, that in the long run, the United States market and these large segments of the United States market experience what is called regression to the mean. And a quick example for that, if you have a conventional coin that you pull out of your pocket, just say a random quarter, assuming it's a normal everyday quarter, if you flip it 5 times in a row and you get 5 heads in a row, what are the odds that you're now going to get a tails? A tail. It's still 50-50. In that case, the past data tells you nothing. I believe that to be true when you look at an individual stock. I believe that to be the case when you look at individual funds, managed funds, because things change. What they did in the past is not necessarily indicative. And there's an entire industry called tactical analysis. There's what is it called? Tactical funds. And they look at this data and they try to figure out, based on the graphs and the charts and the numbers, what stocks are going to do in the future. I don't place value on that. And the results of individual investors seem to indicate that they can't do it either. But with the whole market and with these segments, you do get regression to the mean. So if a fund outperforms the other ones for a period of years, it is likely to regress back towards the mean or the normal returns. So we will balance based on that. Also in this portfolio, we had REITs, not the kind that you buy that I talk about where you're trapped or you pay a big commission, just the Vanguard Real Estate Investment Trust, the Vanguard Total International. And back in 2006, I was very optimistic on the European index and had some of that. And a couple of years it did okay. A couple of years it did not. So as a quick example, back in 2006, the Vanguard Growth Large Cap Growth Fund made 9.13%. The Value Fund made 22%. And the European Fund made 33%, and the REIT made 35%, and the bonds ranged from 3 to 8. So overall, a very nice year. And then, each year you move forward and you look at what is performing, what is not performing. And again, this is someone in retirement. So when you take the money out, you take it out of what has done the best or what you think may no longer do as well in the future. And that's where it gets kind of tricky. Now, of course, 2006 were fine. 2007 were fine. 2008, the shit hits the fan. The total U.S. stock market was down 37%. Real estate was down 37%. International was down even more. So just a bad year all around. The only thing that did nicely were a little bit of the bond funds making 5% or more. And I think it was the high yield or junk bond fund that year that also did okay. So what you do is you sell from the things that didn't suck in 2008. And that basically means you've tapped into your cushion. I'm sorry, high yields did terrible. It was the Ginnie Maes that did okay. This is why you, at 7.33%. This is why you have a lot of different options in your portfolio. But the things that went up, you sell those, and you don't sell the things that went down 25, 35, 45%. Because if you sell at that discount, you're never going to get the money back. We go to 2009, and this is the year where high yields went up 40%. All right. Well, after something in your portfolio goes up 40%, that sounds like a great time to skim some money out of that segment. Ginnie Maes made 5%, and long-term bonds made almost 9%. So you have different things that are doing well, and the U.S. stock market did quite smartly, going up over 30% in 2009. But when you lose 37%, even when you go up 30% the next year, you're still way behind. So you don't want to sell much, if anything, from the stock market yet. And I will point out that in 2009, the Vanguard Emerging Market Fund, after having lost 45%, made 76%. So this is why you want to be in different investments, because in different years, you have different results. We don't know the future. One of the best things you can do for yourself is to acknowledge you do not know what is going to happen. And so we pull from the cushion for a year or two. Maybe we make some adjustments and we, refill the cushion back to where we thought it was right for this individual person. And then we keep making money here and there, some places better than other. And then in 2013, the U.S. stock market makes 32%. Well, that is amazing. 32% across the broad spectrum of the United States. And this is a time now, if you haven't done it already or haven't partially done it before, you refill the cushion. So you put the money back into the cushion so you're safe again. And the cushion can last 10 years, 11 years, 12 years. Currently, in March of 2017, I'm advising people to have the cushion at +1, which means normally 10 years of cushion is sufficient. For now, I'm suggesting 11. It's not because of Trump. It's because we've done really well the last couple of years. So we just want to lock in a little of the profits if, and this is only if, you are close to or in retirement. If you're 30 or 40, I'm standing by, and I will stand by even as the market goes down, if it does, and odds are someday it will, just like I did in 2008. It went down 37%, and I said buy and hold, buy and hold, buy and hold, and it worked out great. It also worked out great from the huge drop that we had from the dot-com bubble in the late 90s, early 2000, and it worked before and before and before. Buy and hold. Timing the market is really, really difficult, and most people get it wrong. I recently talked about how someone last year in February told me they thought the market was going to fall by 15 or 20% by June, and they took all their money out. And of course, the market's gone up 25%, and they're still sitting there in cash. That's really hard to make up. So you've got to be right. And I don't know how you do that. So we rock along, and we maybe every year make adjustments. Some years maybe we don't make adjustments because taking the money out is your way of adjusting. And in this theoretical, and this is manipulated and massaged by Phil, so keep in mind that this may not be realistic. The value of this portfolio, again, we started with $1 million. We took out $50,000 a year, and you end up with $1.39 million. In this case, it is the largest number, but it would not be unreasonable for it to be only $1.3 million or $1.2 million. But in either case, even if I'm not as optimistic in my memories of how this worked out, it beats the target date fund. It even beats the simple mix. It may or may not beat the total stock market. In this case, the total stock market over the last 11 years has returned, give or take, 7.5% to 8%. If it had made 12 or 15% per year, well, it would look way, way better. So if it was the late 90s, 1990 through 1999, just having everything in the total stock market and letting it ride would look much better. On the other hand, the following decade where we had two big market corrections, having a generous portion of your money in the cushion would look way better than being 100% in the stock market. So it depends when, but the idea is that a portfolio that has all these different investments and all these different positions is less volatile. So while the market is falling, your portfolio goes down less. If the market pops 30% and you have 20% of your money in bonds, you will miss out on the upside. That's what volatility is, ups and downs. You will have less down, you will have less up. But at the end of the day, you can do just about as well as the total stock market with a lot less volatility. And that's what one wants in retirement. You're going to sacrifice a little bit of the long-term performance for more comfort, more ease, the ability to sleep at night. But again, if you're 25 or 30, you put it in the stock market. You put it in stocks, domestic or international. So that's a look at it. And one of the things that inspired this, someone had asked me specifically, what do I have in the cushion now? And so here are some of the things that I have in the cushion currently. I have the prime money market or a money market, which is cash. So if you're in retirement, you might want to have a few months up to a year of what you need out of the cushion in cash. So if you are in this theoretical scenario pulling out 5% of your $1 million, having something between $25,000 and $50,000 in the money market is going to be a nice strategy for you. The reason is that even if bonds don't perform, you already have 6 months to a year of cash there, and all of the bonds, virtually all of the stocks will pay dividends, so you can have a regular flow of income even if the market goes down. Then I have a generous portion in short-term bonds. You can use U.S. government bonds or corporate bonds. Corporate bonds pay a little bit more, teeny bit more risk, but they're still pretty good. Right now, I have nothing in intermediate or long-term bond funds, and I've talked about this specifically before. If you own any bond funds, the two things you must know: what is the duration? You can look that up on the website for your page. You can find it on the internet. You can go to morningstar.com and put in the 5-digit code of your mutual fund, and you want to look for the word duration, or just Google it. If it's over 5, I'm disinclined to own that fund, because in an environment of potentially rising rates, you can lose a considerable amount of money. One exception to that possibly is something like that I am using is the high yield or junk bond fund. and this is the other thing you must know about your fund, is what kind of risk are they taking on? If it goes everywhere from AAA down to C or D or even unrated. A lot of people come to me with bond funds that have really high risk profiles, and they just don't know it. So pay attention to that. Another segment is emerging market bonds. So international bonds, again, there's different risks there, but the returns are a little bit higher. And Jenny Mae's mortgage-backed bonds, because they respond to interest rate fluctuations slightly different than really high-quality U.S. bonds. So all those things are in effect. And if you're in retirement, the most important thing is to figure out how much do you need in the cushion. And that is not determined by a flat percentage. That is determined by you personally. How much money do you need? So what is your budget? How much are you getting from Social Security? How much are you getting from a pension? Do you have a piece of property that you rent out? Do you have any other sources of income? Can you sell something if you need to survive? If the stock market goes down, is there something else you can liquidate? So all those things go into play. So there's not one flat answer, but I guess for the bonds, high quality, short duration, avoid really long-term bond funds, and don't panic. Definitely don't look at your portfolio weekly or monthly. Once a quarter is the most frequent that I recommend. Once a year actually will work just fine for most people. So that wraps up our segment on the 11-year performance, and maybe next year we'll do 12 years. We'll take a little break, and we'll come back with our interview.
This survey of American beliefs showed that Americans, at a rate of between 48 and 51%, don't believe in evolution, which is like half. And on top of that 50-odd%, a further 38 to 40% of Americans believe that biological evolution has occurred, but believe that it was initiated by and has since been kind of administered by God. Leaving a very small percentage of Americans who are right. It's not my theory. But I've done material about evolution before, and in Australia and in Britain it barely raises an eyebrow. It's just worth a chuckle. But in America it's quite contentious to do comedy about evolution, It gets a gasp. It's the equivalent of doing material about fisting anywhere else, It's quite confronting for them. I've been heckled by a man in the front row in New York loudly defending his disbelief in evolution. I've been pulled aside in foyers by people defending their disbelief in evolution in the same terms, interestingly enough. It's the same defense that the intelligent design movement uses in the high courts of American states to try and sneak its pseudoscience into American high schools. And that defense is always, but evolution is only a theory. Which is true. I mean, it is a theory, and it's good that they say that. I think it gives you hope, doesn't it? That maybe they feel the same way about the theory of gravity. And they might just float the fuck away.
This is Phil Ferguson with Polaris Financial Planning, the home of science-based investing. I see people owning really bad investments all of the time. Many advisors are paid a commission by a big company to sell you something you may not need. It's kind of like church. They create fear, then they tell you what you want to hear, and then they take your money. What you want is an advisor that is paid only by you. That is a fee-only fiduciary advisor. Remember, people work for who they are paid by. You can contact me, Phil, at PolarisFinancialPlanning.com, or listen to the cleverly titled The Phil Ferguson Show. Each show we have an interesting investing skeptically topic and an interview with someone fighting to end religion. Polaris also gives 10% of gross revenue to support the growing secular movement. You're not just getting better investments, you're helping to change the world. Well, everybody, we, of course, have another very special guest, Thomas True. Thomas, are you there?
Yeah, it's great to be with you, Phil.
Well,
always glad to be with you or see you. You're a good friend.
Thanks for being on. Regular listeners may know Thomas, but if you're a new listener, Thomas runs the convention called Gateway to Reason in St. Louis, Missouri. When is that next?
This summer, it's going to be July 28th to 30th. It's going to be at the Holiday Inn, Route 66 Southwest Convention Center. That's on the actual old Route 66. It's in St. Louis area, but the actual city is Sunset Hills, so it's actually on old Route 66.
Now, Thomas, I do want to address kind of the elephant in the room, and I know that 2 years ago, this thing was a huge success, sellout crowd, but last year something went wrong. Can you talk about that and give the listeners some reassurance that that's not going to happen again?
Yeah, absolutely. That's an excellent question. Basically, the first year that I did this, I found my venue, and based upon the seating size and so on and so forth and the number of tickets that would be available, that's how I figured my budget. And so since it's sold out, everything worked. Well, come to find out, that doesn't happen all that often. So when I used the same formula for the second year, I didn't quite reach the point of being able to pay for the venue, airline tickets, etc. All the things that help make it work. So when it came time to in July, when it's getting close to within, I think it was probably about 3 weeks, I kept waiting. People kept saying, "Oh, it's going to work, and it didn't work. I finally had to cancel it, and that was really difficult to do. But I just really had no choice because I couldn't see any option at that point. To be quite honest, in the entire year leading up to the one that I had to cancel last year, I made that much in ticket sales in 1 month the year before. So it was quite a drastic drop-off. So the big difference is this year is I have a patron who has stepped up. He was at the first one, so I didn't have to sell it to him. He already was sold on the idea and liked what I did, and that was amazing. And I told them first thing I need to do is get the refunds out to everybody because, they made a commitment to me and I wasn't able to follow through with that. So I have to be able to, take care of them first. Some people said I could keep the money, but I generally went ahead and gave everybody a refund because it was just too complicated to figure the ticket sales versus what they were going to be this year and differentials and all that kind of stuff. So I just thought it'd be better to give everyone a refund.
So last year, it didn't work. You tried it, and now, and I happen to know who your patron is, and I'm not going to say because he or she is not here to defend themselves. But I think it's safe to say we can rest assured that the bills are going to be paid no matter what, even if 5 people show up.
Yeah, well, we actually got more people than that already sold tickets. So,
I understand.
Yeah, I mean that was literally his attitude on it. And said, "Well, even if it's just you and me, Tom, we'll have a good time."
Right, and that's
what I like to hear.
That's what I wanted to make sure the listeners understood, that this has changed, and I'm a sponsor and I have been for multiple years, but not to the level that this person is sponsoring. And so
all right, yeah,
whether
absolutely.
This convention draws in 50 or 500 or whatever, it's gonna happen. So if you're in the St. Louis area or you can get to the St. Louis area, this convention, it is going to happen. It's not cancelable because there's money behind it. And who are we going to have come and visit and talk?
Well, we have an amazing lineup. And you. Ha!
That's right. That's fair. I can appreciate that.
No. You know how much I believe in what you do with Polaris Financial. I mean, I was promoting you before you were promoting me, and that's how much I believe in what you do. So, my goal is that every atheist that can use your services should take advantage of it until, like you say, you teach them enough to where they can fire you.
That's right. So who are the speakers that aren't Phil?
I have a great lineup here. Mandisa Thomas with Black Nonbelievers. David Fitzgerald. He's an author and writer, very well known in the community. We have Seth Andrews coming back with A Thinking Atheist. Steve Hill's going to be doing a comedy routine in the VIP section with Keith Jensen and Brother Sam Singleton. We also have Matt Dillahunty coming back. Emery and Heather Henderson of the Ardent Atheist and Skeptically Yours are going to be there. They're going to be doing a 90-minute show there, so you definitely want to show up for that because you can be in the audience and have yourself be heard. So
very nice.
Yeah, a very wide range. Dr. Margie Kerr, who I met at a conference with you, she actually had a table next to you, and I was just real impressed with her. She does the study of fear. I'm not going to say the psychology because she's a sociologist.
Sure.
But one of the goals, of course, with the conference is to have a well-rounded aspect that you don't normally get in all conferences, like through education, humanism, skepticism, philosophy, and things like that. Two things that are going to be new this time that we didn't have in the first one. We're going to have at least two panel discussions. One is going to be about the I forget the actual name. Let me bring up my schedule and remind myself. But the other one's going to be about secular parenting. There's some people that I'm in contact with who are do like homeschooling secular or have emphasis on being a secular parent in the religious world. So they're going to be doing a panel on that, and there's also going to be let's see. Let me see. With one of our speakers, I just looked at the schedule and noticed that Margaret Downey is going to be being interviewed by Seth Andrews for her 25 years as a free thought activist. So that's going to be live on stage. So that'll be pretty exciting. So,
and if anyone doesn't know Margaret, she's done a lot. She runs Pennsylvania Free Thought Society, in Philadelphia, which is where I'm going to be shortly. And she also is a former president of Atheist Alliance International. So she's done a lot over a long period of time.
Yeah, and she's just a wonderful, sweet person. She's always nice to me, even though I spell her name wrong and all that kind of stuff. But you know how it is with spelling.
Yeah, I'm not good at it.
So there. The other panel that I was talking about earlier was how to talk to atheists, and I have 3 people lined up to do that. I have Steve Hill. He's going to be one of the speakers. I think I've talked to him about this. I know I talk to him a lot, and sometimes when you talk to people a lot, you tend to forget, did I mention this thing that was actually important or just the stuff that we like to talk about?
Well, and of course, Steve Hill is not only a really good comedian, he recently ran for elected office as an open and out atheist, so that's very cool.
Exactly. But that panel discussion is going to be called How to Talk to an Atheist. It's going to be in 2 parts. Part of it will be on Saturday, part on Sunday. So if you miss one, you can catch the other. And it'll kind of develop from the initial talk. Oh, Nate Phelps is going to be there. I really was sad that, for everybody not to be there, but Nate especially because I used to work in television in Topeka, and I actually covered some stories with his dad back in the bad old days.
And let's
when
pretend
I was
a listener may not know, who is his dad?
His dad was the founder of Westboro Baptist Church, which is famous for the God Hates Fags protests that are done around the country. Recently, his niece, who I think he said that he hasn't met, did a TED Talk, and I shared that with him, and I was trying to check the timeline, and I think he had not seen that prior to me sharing that with him. So There's just some tremendous people that are going to be there that you don't want to miss. Vicky Garrison, who is with No Longer Quivering, which refers to the quiverful movement in the Christian fundamentalist movement, where a woman basically her purpose is to have as many children as possible, a quiverful. Of course, Rebecca Vitzman's going to be there. She and I worked on the first humanist disaster recovery team. She'll chastise me if I say that wrong. In Columbia, South Carolina, last January, spent like 8 days down there helping out with rebuilding some homes that got damaged in floods that were down there. So just a wonderful lineup. James Croft from the Ethical Society, Rebecca Markert and Elizabeth Cable are going to be there from FFRF. They're two staff attorneys from FFRF, so I'm a big supporter of FFRF.
And so all of this costs what, like $600?
Well, almost, but if you get your ticket before the end of this month, March 31st, it's only $25, which is
that's almost $600.
Yeah, that's less than $1 a speaker. And even if you aren't able to get the ticket before then, save your quarters, and afterwards it's only $50 until the day of the event. And if you wait till the day of the event, it's just $10 more. $60.
That's crazy cheap, Thomas. And as you know, I still think it's too low. But okay, whatever. Everybody, you can get your tickets for $25, $50 if you wait. And how do they get a ticket?
Well, pretty simple. You go to gatewaytoreason.com, and I placed on every page there's at least one button that says Buy Tickets, and you can click that, and you can purchase the tickets through Eventbrite. VIP tickets are available for $100. So for right now, $125, you get the full shebang, and that's less than most conferences are for just general admission. So
now,
that gets
when you
the
say
full treatment.
Gateway to Reason, is that TWO, TOO?
It's all letters because I'm kind of OCD, so all spelt out. GATEWAYTOREASON.com.
And of course, if you Google it, you can find it. But
yep.
$25, maybe $50 if you're hearing this show just in time. And it's when again? July?
A few weeks later, yeah. July 28th to 30th, 3 days, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday.
And this place has air conditioning?
Holiday Inn, Route 66 Southwest Conference Center. You can book your rooms through the website as well under the lodging tab. You can either get your rooms individually, or we have package deals where you can get your room all together, and that includes your VIP ticket. But before we leave off, we are also offering something special, a raffle to take a helicopter tour of the city of the area of St. Louis, about a 20-minute flight. We're going to have a video on that soon. And just for $20, you have a chance to win a helicopter tour of St. Louis.
Holy crap, dude! That's cool.
No lie.
I mean, what? I wouldn't even know what that would something like that normally cost. Like $1,000.
Well, if you go down to the Arch and take their 5-minute tour, I think it's about $65.
Oh,
for a 20-minute tour like what we're planning is. Well, it's at least $165. Yeah, so it's real good value. I mean, heck, you can buy 5 tickets, and if you win out of one of those 5, you made money. Bring your camera when you go. Also, a couple of things real quick before we go. We're going to have a cosplay costume party. And there's going to be a board game room. You have to bring your own games, but there's going to be a room set up so those people who like to play board games, that was one of the comments that I got, is that more people would have came if they could have had people play board games with it. Say, well, we'll make it so.
I like it. Well, Thomas, thank you very much. How can people reach you if they have direct questions?
My email is on the website. It's basically info@gatewaytoreason.com. That's info@gatewaytoreason.com. All spelt out, except for the @sign.
Sure, of course, the ad sign. All right. Well, Thomas, thank you so much for being on the show, and I'm very, very excited about seeing you at the very end of July.
It's going to be great.
Right.
Dress comfortably because it's going to be warm.
We'll talk to you later, Thomas.
Thank you, Phil. Have a good day.
All right, everybody. Welcome back. Now with me, I have someone with a wonderful name. It's Phil, and of course, his last name is Zuckerman. How are you, sir?
I'm doing quite well, Phil. Thanks.
Oh, it's my pleasure to have you on. Now, the listeners, I hope they know, but maybe they don't. You've written a couple books about religion and secularity. Why don't you tell us about that for a little bit?
Yeah, my two most recent books, I'll start with there, and then I can quickly refer to some others. I wrote two books, one for a popular audience recently called Living the Secular Life, and it was published by Penguin, and the other is called The Non-Religious, Understanding Secular People and Societies, and that was published by Oxford. And it's kind of a funny story. The Oxford book, I wanted to put together a really empirical, scholarly volume that would sort of put between two covers everything we know about secular people and secular societies. You know, like a real kind of data-driven, almost like gala lit review. And so I'm very familiar with the sociological literature. I have a colleague, Frank Pasquale, who's an anthropologist. I have another colleague, Luke Galen, who's a psychologist, and they're familiar with their respective literatures. So I contacted them a few years ago and said, hey, I know the social, you know the psychology literature, you know the anthro, let's put it all together in this one big volume. And they said, okay. And so, you know, we have, it's basically any studies that have ever been done in the modern world on secular people, everything from their politics to their neurology to their criminal behavior to their charitable behavior to their organizational behavior, whatever. Let's put it all in one volume. So we pitched it to Oxford. I wrote the proposal in the opening chapter. The day that Oxford sent us the contract for that book, I get an email from Penguin. You know, Penguin's one of the biggest book publishers in the U.S., if not the world, asking me to write a book about secular life in America. And so I was like, oh my God, I can't, you know, that was like a dream come true for me. I've written quite a few books, academic books, but I had yet to write a popular book for a wide audience, you know, what they call a trade publisher. So I said yes to Penguin and basically was working on these two projects at the same time for about a year or two. It was quite stressful, but I managed to pull it off. Obviously, Frank and Luke did a lot of work on the Oxford book. But so I guess what I would say is for those who are looking for like the state-of-the-art scholarly book that's very empirical, data-driven, I would go with The Non-Religious by Oxford. But for those who are looking for a more, I guess, entertaining and engaging read, one with a lot more stories, personal anecdotes, narratives based on interviews with people, a kind of book that you could read hopefully on the airplane, or better yet, give to your Christian mother-in-law, kind of explaining what being secular is all about. It's a very positive, it's a very, I think, upbeat account of kind of secular life in the contemporary world. That would be then Living the Secular Life, published by Penguin. So those are my two big books right now. Others may have heard of, I wrote a book called Society Without God back in 2008 about Scandinavia being among the least religious society in the world and yet quite healthy. And I've written books, Faith No More, on apostasy, people who reject religion, and others as well that you are free to look up.
Now, I know that with the statistics, and you've talked about the Sweden and Netherlands and how secular they are. Well, of course, in the recent weeks, they've become big stories in the news because apparently Trump has touched the nerve and found out that they have constant riots and rising crime. What do you say about that? What information do you have, off the top of your head about that?
Yeah, well, I lived in Denmark. I have lived in Denmark for 2 years. I have visited Sweden, Norway, and Denmark extensively outside of those years living there, for 2 weeks here, 2 weeks there. I do teach a class on Scandinavian culture here at the Claremont colleges. So I like to think I'm relatively informed about things in Scandinavia, maybe not as much as top experts. And what I can say is first of all, the worst terrorist attack in Scandinavia, the greatest loss of civilian life since the Nazis occupied Norway in World War II and Denmark. The greatest loss of life took place in Oslo about 5 years ago, and it was at the hands of a Christian white nationalist who attacked teenagers at a social democratic summer camp in the waters out on the islands outside of Oslo. So in terms of terrorist attacks, Muslims are not the threat that the Trump administration would like you to believe. If anything, a case could be made that you had this crazy or malevolent Christian white nationalist who plotted a very successful attack, killing over 70 young women and children, teenagers. That said, there's also no doubt that there have been attempts on the lives of the Danish cartoonists who wrote who depicted Muhammad in a series of cartoons back in 2005. Those terrorist attacks are real. They've been one guy, a Somali guy, almost killed Kurt Vestergaard. He did manage to get into his house with an axe, I believe, but the artist was able to get into the safe room with his granddaughter just in time. So there have been very real terrorist attacks. There were terrorist attacks in Copenhagen where people were killed in a cafe and also at the Jewish synagogue in Copenhagen. So I don't want to say there's been no Muslim Islamic fundamentalist inspired crimes. There have been. And I guess the last thing I would say is it is true that immigrant communities, particularly from Muslim majority nations in Scandinavia, have a higher rate of crime and poverty than ethnic Scandinavian communities or people. But the overall story is one of integration, success, embracing of democracy. The vast majority of Muslim immigrants in Norway, Sweden, and Denmark are, fully functioning, content people who pay their taxes and go to work and enroll their children in school and are relieved and grateful to be safe if they are refugees. And so, yes, there are some disaffected young people who turn to Islamic fundamentalism, and that's also a fact. But it's nothing like what the Trump administration has painted it to be, for sure.
Well, I think almost nothing is like what the Trump administration paints it to be.
That's for sure. That is for sure.
I've noticed
you
that.
Say that again.
Yeah.
And what's important there is, people always ask me, well, is religion, overall, would I say that religion does more harm or more good in the world or in history? And I actually, even though I am secular and I'm also a secularist and that I am engaged in secular activity, I also actually struggle with that question because I do think a strong case can be made that religion does a lot of good for a lot of people in many, many ways throughout history and in our contemporary world. But right now, I think what we're seeing is the power of religion to do tremendous evil in the world, or maybe that's an awful word, evil, is to cause pain and suffering. By that I mean Trump himself is probably not religious, but his support comes from the most religious segments of American society. Evangelical Christians, 81% voted for Trump. Strongly religious Jews seem to like Trump. In other words, you have the most devout in our country who are sort of supporting this man's, lies and pernicious politics. So in this instance, nothing coming out of the White House is true, and we can thank. His religion is white. His base is white evangelical Christians. So we can really place the blame on their shoulders more than anyone.
Well, the phrase that I like to use is that religion is a net negative on our probability of survival as a species.
Well, definitely when you consider global warming. I mean, I think, in terms of creating community, staffing soup kitchens, handing out blankets, providing people with, I think religion, does do a lot of good. But overall, the hostility to science, the hostility to understanding what we need to do about global warming, limiting of stem cell research, then I'm probably today, it's before lunch, but yes, I would agree with you that it's probably a net negative.
Well, I would guess, and correct me if I'm wrong, that global warming is not your field of expertise, but you brought it up. So how can we get religious people to be more involved and concerned about that issue?
Yeah, you're correct. It's not my area of expertise. However, I do know I'm familiar with the data on who tends to understand the science behind global warming and who tends to want to do something about it. And in every study I'm familiar with, the correlation is strong and robust. The more secular people are, the more likely they are to understand the science, and the more likely they are to want to do something about it. And that's at the individual level, but also at the societal level. For example, the nations of Scandinavia were the only countries that not only signed the Kyoto Protocol, but actually met the requirements of the Kyoto Protocol by stopping their greenhouse gas emissions, by shifting their energy sources, et cetera, et cetera. And the more religious a person is, whether they're Catholic, Muslim, Jewish, whatever, Protestant, the more likely they are to deny the science behind global warming and not want to do anything about it. So this is a long-winded way of avoiding your question, which is, what are we supposed to do about this? How can we explain or engage our religious brothers and sisters who want to deny this stuff? I think there's, two approaches. To me, there's the political engagement approach, and that is, I'm not going to try to convince anybody. I'm just going to make my voice as loud as possible. I'm going to call Congress people. I'm going to call senators. I'm going to write letters to them and demand that they take action against global warming. And if enough of us do this, if enough of us call their offices, donate to their Democratic rivals in various midterm elections, that's just the way we flex our political muscle. On the other hand, then I guess it's the soft sell, where we just have to try and engage our friends, neighbors, and family members who are religious, who don't understand global warming, and try to make a human connection. Try to be empathetic and get them to be empathetic. Try to tell stories and try your best to use your friendship and your family bonds to say, hey, come on, surely you can understand that this is not a good thing. It's going to cause pain and suffering for everybody. But I have no magic secret there on what kind of rhetoric you use. People who don't think rationally about science aren't going to be convinced by a scientific study. People that don't understand data aren't going to be convinced by more data. So you have to, for those folks, you're going to have to think about stories, you're going to have to think about empathetic relations, and you just have to think about other approaches to get them to maybe see this differently.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because while you were talking, I was thinking about creationists as well, and data doesn't really do it for them. That's not...
I can't have any conversation. I mean, anybody who believes in Adam and Eve and the serpent, I'm pretty much just going to say, hey, let's talk about the latest, movie or something. I can't even.
Yeah.
To me, it's like a non. It's like, you got to be joking. I mean, that's like talking to somebody who thinks leprechauns are, riding unicycles around fucking the moon or something. I don't even know how to. If someone believes in Adam and Eve and the serpent, it's like, that's when you just think, like, I hope you just, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, for me, I actually quite enjoy that. So, that's fun for me. And hopefully somewhere along the way, some of the people make a difference. The one group that I have zero tolerance for is 9/11 truthers.
Oh, man. But I want to ask you a question. When you say you enjoy discussing with creationists, tell me about that. Why do you enjoy it, and what happens?
Well, I enjoy it because I think there's a chance that if they look at information differently, at some point they can work their way out of it. Because they're so surrounded. I mean, just like a little kid, at 3 or 4, if everyone tells you that there is Santa,
sure,
it's not actually irrational to believe that there's Santa because everyone's telling you that. So
absolutely,
if everyone around you thinks there is a God and that Christianity isn't correct and Jesus does care about you, then their position doesn't necessarily become insane or incomprehensible. But we were I spent some time in Arkansas. That's the state right below Missouri. Since you're way out on the West Coast, you may not be familiar with these places.
Okay.
And when I first got there, I would meet somebody, and the first question they would ask is my name, and I'd say I'm Phil. And then they say, what church do you go to?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And
that's it.
I had never experienced that before, and I thought that was one of these urban legends that people would actually do something like that, but they did.
Okay.
And so I learned to pull up, I went into the Yellow Pages. They used to have these books that had all the phone numbers in your area.
Okay.
And
I've heard of those.
Yeah. You're old enough.
They're awesome.
And I went through it, and I found, the Church of Jesus on 123 Main Street, and at least I had a cop out, because amazingly, not always am I in the mood for arguing. So someone would say, "What church do you go to?" And I go, "Church of Jesus on 123 Main Street," with the expectation, in my delusional state, my naive state, that would satisfy them, and they'd be okay. Well, at least you're a Christian.
Oh, right.
Of course, then they quickly said, "That's the wrong church."
God, you can't win.
And so what I ended up adopting, the very first time it happened quite accidentally, and it was very, very over the top, but someone asked me what church that I went to, and I'm like, "What the fuck is wrong with you?"
Okay.
And they're like, "Excuse me?" And I go, "My wife's here. Why don't you ask the two of us what our favorite sexual position is?"
Wow.
And they're like, "What?" And I said, "That's one of the most intimate questions you can ask, and that's what you start with? Dude, you don't even know my last name. You just asked my first name, and you want to know about my religious beliefs. What is wrong with you?"
Wow.
And
how'd that go?
It went really poorly.
Okay.
But what?
But I can understand the frustration on your end.
And my fantasy was that if someone has that happen to them a second or a third or a fourth time, maybe it's not going to be their second question anymore.
Yeah. There you go.
And so that's kind of the psychology behind the engagement. But one of the things that you talk about regularly in your work is the rise of secularism in America. Mm-hmm. Is it really happening? Because it doesn't feel like it in today's politics. What's going on there?
Yes, it's definitely really happening. But what also is happening is that it's more of a bifurcation. The middle is fading away. And by middle, I mean your kind of mainline, liberal Protestants that dominated U.S. society, let's say in the 50s and even 60s. All those congregations have been losing members for 20, 30 years to death, and the young kids aren't coming back. So, but you have the fundamentalists are holding tight. So what you have is more and more people saying they're non-religious. They're not going to church anymore. They don't identify with the religion, and they're just getting on with their lives. So they're not becoming outspoken atheists. They're not getting involved in secular community. They're just getting on with their work, their family, their hobbies, et cetera, et cetera. And so there's no question the data is we get it from multiple data sources, not just Pew, but Gallup, American Religious Identification Survey. I mean, every Win Gallup, every data source we have at the national level has shown that the rise of the non-religious is strong and unlike anything we've ever seen. I mean, Time Magazine recently dubbed it one of the 10 trends most changing American society. So, back 40 years ago, fewer than 5% of Americans said they had no religion. Today, it's somewhere between 25 and 28% of nationally. Among younger people, among 20-somethings, it's over 35% saying they have no religion. We've never seen numbers this high. Those people, however, are not a coherent, tight-knit, community of, it's not like we have 25% of secular people who are in contact with each other, in the same way that religious folks are in terms of networking, in terms of political agendas, in terms of mobilization. So it's a diffuse segment of the population. But there's no question that you also have about 30% of the U.S. that is evangelical, and they won the Ponzi scheme in the election. I mean, they didn't win the election; they lost by 3 million votes, but they won the Ponzi scheme known as the Electoral College, which is a sham of democracy. And so they voted out, and the white evangelicals voted in droves for Donald Trump. It should be noted about a third of Latinos voted for him as well, which complicates things, although my hunch is those are among the more religious of the Latino community who have issues with abortion. But so what we're dealing with right now is a growing secularism across the population, but the right-wing religious folks are currently in power in the White House and in our Senate and our Congress. So these things are happening simultaneously.
Well, you'd mentioned, and it's one of my favorite statistics to have, that under 30 and under 25 and even down to 18, where available, the data says the percentage of secular is higher and higher and higher.
Yeah.
And I'm no expert on population dynamics, but I would assume that a larger percentage of 25-year-olds will be alive in 20 years than the current 60-year-olds.
That's correct. And what happens is there's a couple things here. There's good news and bad news. The bad news is secular people tend to have the fewest kids, or maybe that's good news for the globe. It's bad news for the overall religious secular balance. But so the more religious you are, the more kids you have. and the less religious you are, the more secular are, the fewer kids you have. So secular people do not tend to have lots of children, so demographically that puts secularism at a great disadvantage, particularly globally. On the good news, though, the fact that we have about 35% or more of 20-somethings saying they have no religion, this is enormous, because even if many of them return to religion once they get married and have kids, which generally is a common pattern. You find that people drop out of religion in their college age years and don't have much interest in it in their 20s, but once they get married and have kids, they suddenly feel this pang of, oh, we got to get the kids in Sunday school, or, oh, my parents want the kids to be baptized, or whatever. So a certain percentage will return to the fold. However, there's never been that high of a chunk of non-religious people among 20-somethings. So among 20-somethings 10 years ago, among 20-somethings, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, never was there a 35, 36, 37% rate of secularity among those 20-somethings in earlier years. So even if the current cohort, some of them return to religion, nothing like what the vast majority won't. And they, of course, yes, will become 30s and 40s, and they will raise their kids. And we know that people that are non-religious, generally don't raise their kids religious. A small minority do, but the vast majority don't. So I would expect this trend to increase as the older age cohorts die off, the more religious ones, and the younger ones have children of their own. I would expect to see a continuing uptick of secularity. That's what I would predict at this point.
Yeah, and I think, I don't have the data, but it seems like it was very common before to kind of go away from religion, but then, like you said, as you have kids, the two things that happen is you go back to religion and you buy a video camera.
Exactly.
Well, now no one's buying video cameras because it's on their phone.
That's right.
And very, very few of those young adults, when they have kids, seem to go back at all.
I agree.
And it creates a circuit break.
I agree.
So you have that. And I think the other thing is that even though I am terrified in some ways, at least for other people, at least in the United States, being able to travel and live a safe and comfortable livelihood, with religion and power, I think that pushes away the 18 and 25-year-olds even more from religion.
I totally agree with you. I think that the more we see these religious people out there leading the Trump charge, it's bad for religion in the long run in the United States. Young people are going to be turned off. The homophobia of religion, the transphobia of religion, the Islamophobia of religion, the anti-Semitism of Christian religion. It's all going to, the science denial. Young people they're not down with this for the most part. Some are for sure. Yeah. I've met a few when I go speaking at various campuses, and you find your young Republican conservative evangelicals that show up to debate. But the vast majority of America's youth have no problem with homosexuality, are open to transgendered people's rights and understanding the fluidity of gender. I mean, so yeah, the strongly religious people you see on Fox News with the little crucifix between their clavicles, hammering this arch-conservative, right-wing, neo-fascist agenda, are doing real damage to religion. And the funny thing is that's, in a way, part of the reason religion is so weak in Europe is because they had, for centuries, religion and government were so linked together that, there was such a strong bond between the church and the government that as Europeans became dissatisfied with their governments, they also didn't like religion as well. In other words, as they were overthrowing the monarchies, they said, screw the priests as well. They're part of the problem. And so the separation of church and state actually saves both. If you have a separation of church and state, you can be down on state and still dig the church, or vice versa. But the more they blend, the more they take each other down. So the more that Trump embraces evangelical Christians and the more damage he does, people are gonna be pissed at Trump, and they're also gonna by nature think, well, look at those evangelicals. So I do think it's that there is some silver lining there. There was something else you said that I wanted to comment on, but I forget what it was.
Oh, wow, gosh. We'll have to look at the tape later, but it's one of those things that I've felt kind of the same way about Europe. When you have one official religion, when you are a teenager or a young adult and you rebel, you rebel against your parents and you rebel against government and religion, it's kind of one big package, and you eventually come back and think your parents aren't so bad, and maybe the government provides some nice services, but then religion just doesn't really come back. So, but we had the a la carte menu here that a lot of people leave their religion. And I was thinking, in the past when people would get married, often one person would convert to the other person's religion. But as the percentage of non-religious grow up and get married and have kids, not only are they not likely to raise their kids religious, but there's a good chance they're going to marry someone who is religious and kind of by default take them out of the circuit too.
Yeah.
At least sometimes.
You just remind. So that's what I was meant to comment on in your earlier comment, which I'm glad you raised similar issues. So you said we're creating like a kind of a circuit break here, and you're talking about the kind of effects others have on religiosity. So if you're non-religious and you marry a spouse who is, you're going to affect each other, and the effect on the kids is going to be clear, that the kids are going to be more likely to be secular. And so what I wanted to emphasize was, to me as a sociologist, I have always seen socialization as crucial to religious perpetuation. You mentioned earlier, if you tell kids that are 3 that there's a Santa Claus, of course they're going to believe it. I've always believed that the engine behind religion is socialization. I don't think people always think, there's philosophical reasons people are religious. They want to understand the deep answers to deep questions. Or there's psychological reasons people are religious. They need comfort in the face of suffering, so they turn to religion. Those are all true for most people or many people. But I think the biggest engine that keeps religion chugging along is socialization, meaning you are raised by people who are religious and they socialize you to be religious. And if the people that love you and care for you and feed you and nurture you are religious, there's a strong propensity to be religious as well. There's all kinds of evolutionary reasons for that, personal reasons, psychological, and so on and so forth. But the theory, at least by Steve Bruce up in Scotland, is like, if kids aren't socialized to be religious, it's very unlikely that they will embrace religion later in life. A few will, 5%, 10%, 15%, but the vast majority of people, if you're raised without religious faith in particular, it's going to make no sense as you get older. So I think you're absolutely right. As we see this growing cohort once the 20-somethings get married and have kids and raise their kids without religion, you're going to find this growing secularity and this break in the kind of religious secularization cycle. And as people start to, as you said, marry other people from different faiths, I think actually there's a corroding effect there as well. Every now and then, what happens is people will sometimes adopt the religion of their spouse to make their spouse happy, but they don't really buy it. They just do it as a formality, so they're not sincere in it. And what you'll find is in those mixed marriages, the children pick up on that, and often the religion does not get passed down with the same intensity or the same purity as would have been the case if both parents were believers.
Well, I had a friend that was raised Catholic, and they struggled with getting out of Catholicism, and they were leaving religion but still had that classic Catholic guilt. And he told me at one point that he was talking to his mom about it, and his mom was getting up in years, and she looked at him and she said, we never believed that shit. And he said, what? That's so ridiculous. We never believed that. And he said, well, how come no one told me?
Yeah.
Well, quite honestly,
so
it was so obviously ludicrous that we never thought that we'd have to tell you that it was crap.
Oh, man.
And he's like, well, if you didn't believe it, why did you go to church? Well, honey, back in the 60s, you had to go to church.
That's just what you did.
And he's like, well, then why Catholic? And they said, it was the closest one to our house.
Oh, man, that's rough.
So they moved, and the closest church was Catholic. And like you're talking about, the socialization. Where else do you go to meet a bunch of people? And today, you go to your keyboard, whether it's on your phone or in front of your monitor.
That's right.
And you meet people. But yeah, that was an interesting story. I thought that, the child in that case believed it because no one told them not to.
Yeah, that's right. So interesting.
Now, I also see that you're involved with a social secular studies program.
Yeah.
Tell me about that. What's going on with that?
So I teach at a small liberal arts college. It's called Pitzer College in Claremont, California. It's one of the 5 Claremont colleges. And about 5 or 6 years ago, we started a secular studies program. Basically, students can get a degree in secular studies. They take classes in the history of secularism, free thought, atheism, agnosticism. They take classes on the sociology of secularity. They take classes on church-state relations, political science issues related to secularism, atheism, humanism, agnosticism, free thought. And it's the only program in the United States that offers a full slate of courses just looking at secularity, past and present. So we're looking at secular culture, movements, ideologies throughout history and in the contemporary world. And I'm thrilled. Basically, if you want to study religion, obviously there's a zillion and one religious studies departments all over the world. There's a lot to study. The history of religion, psychology of religion, anthropology of religion, you name it. But a growing number of us are starting to look at secular people, secular culture, the history of it, the sociology of it, the anthropology of it, the psychology of it. And so enough of my colleagues got together and we formed this small department and we got it approved. So we have offer courses. Let's see, I offer classes like the sociology of secularity, secularism and skepticism, social construction of morality. We have classes on enlightenment and anxiety in the age of enlightenment, classes on church-state issues, classes on political secularism, classes on debates over evolution, and we are just part of the growing movement of secular studies that you're seeing burgeoning around throughout academia. Florida University of Miami just endowed a chair in atheism. They have yet to fill it, but I know they're doing the job search right now. I didn't apply because I didn't want to move to Florida, but so that's my secular studies program. We've got about 6 faculty members affiliated with it, and it's fun and it's exciting.
Well,
I love it.
Great. I know you had limited time, so why don't you tell us where we can find you and learn more about what's going on in your world?
You bet. Well, obviously my books are available on Amazon.com. If you just go to Phil Zuckerman, you'll see Living the Secular Life and the Non-Religious, as well as other books I've written and edited. I'm also on Twitter, Phil Zuckerman. That's pretty much it. I got a webpage, philzuckerman.com, that kind of has some videos and some links to books and updates on where I'm speaking and whatnot. I'll be speaking in Ashland, Oregon in about 2 weeks. That's coming up. Recently spoke down at Orange County Humanists organization, which was a lot of fun. So that's what's happening right now.
Great. Well, Phil, thank you for being on the Phil Ferguson Show, and I appreciate your time and all the work that you've done.
Thank you so much, Phil. It was my pleasure. Hope you're doing well.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
You're listening to The Phil Ferguson Show.
I like how you call homosexuality an abomination.
I don't say homosexuality is an abomination, Mr. President. The Bible does.
Yes, it does. Leviticus
18:22.
Chapter and verse. I wanted to ask you a couple of questions while I had you here. I'm interested in selling my youngest daughter into slavery as sanctioned in Exodus 21:7. She's a Georgetown sophomore, speaks fluent Italian, always cleared the table when it was her turn. What would a good price for her be? While thinking about that, can I ask another? My chief of staff, Leo McGarry, insists on working on the Sabbath. Exodus 35:2 clearly says he should be put to death. Am I morally obligated to kill him myself, or is it okay to call the police? Here's one that's really important, because we've got a lot of sports fans in this town. Touching the skin of a dead pig makes one unclean. Leviticus 11:7. If they promise to wear gloves, can the Washington Redskins still play football? Can Notre Dame? Can West Point? Does the whole town really have to be together to stone my brother John for planting different crops side by side? Can I burn my mother in a small family gathering for wearing garments made from 2 different threads? Think about those questions, would you? One last thing. While you may be mistaking this for your monthly meeting of the ignorant tight-ass club, in this building when the president stands, nobody sits.
Well, of course, we're getting near the end of the show, and this is the part where I normally would read some reviews, but I didn't get any this last week. So if you can go to iTunes or Stitcher and leave a review, if there's another platform that has reviews, please let me know. Those are always nice to have, especially if they're 5-star. So leave a review. Another bit of news, reminder,
The Phil Ferguson Show, unlike a lot of shows, does not have a Patreon account. This is a shamelessly self-promotional show that brings in clients for my business, Polaris Financial Planning. And so that's how the finances of this functions. So I don't need your $3 or $4 or $5 a month donation, but there are groups that do. So go find one. Anything from Americans United for the Separation of Church and State. Last show we had on Barry Lynn. Secular Student Alliance, American Atheists, American Humanists, Atheist Alliance International, Atheist Alliance of America. The list goes on and on. FFRF, Freedom from Religion Foundation. These organizations do amazing things with your money. Please go donate. I am of the opinion that you don't have to tithe. You don't have to give 10%. But if you gave 5% of your income to these organizations, we could outdo the funding of religion in a very, very short period of time, because we don't have to spend money to upkeep our organ or our stained glass windows. So go donate some money. If you don't have money, fine, don't donate money. But I know a lot of my listeners, and partly because of the topic, have money. Go donate some money. You can't take it with you. I mean, plan to live for a very long period of time, but also be charitable and give some money away. And while we're on the topic of money, the other thing I wanted to announce today is that I'm going to increase the minimum amount of money required to become a client of Polaris Financial Planning. That's my business, to have me help you personally on an ongoing basis. A few months ago, I raised it to $100,000, and I know there's a lot of people that don't have $100,000, and that I can't be there for them, but now I have to raise it to $250,000. It's not that I necessarily want to do this, but the show has far exceeded my wildest expectations. The numbers of listeners and the number of people that contact me after listening to the show, and they want to hire me. And I'm flattered and humbled beyond words, but it's too much. It's overwhelming, and I can't do it, or at least I won't be able to do it for long. And I kind of see myself as, heading towards a wall where I'm going to have a problem. And I want to try to break, I guess, and try to slow down a little bit before I get to that point where there's a problem. At some points in time, I get 3 to 4 emails and or phone calls a day of people wanting to hire me. And it's just me. I don't have any other employees, and I don't expect that I'm going to have any other employees. Maybe if there's someone else in a secular movement that does a similar thing, if you want to contact me, maybe I can refer people to you if I can become comfortable that you're doing basically the same thing that I am. But like I said, I don't really want to do this, but I don't really have a choice. It's not fair to people that have already hired me if they can't reach me. And I'm noticing that happening a little bit, and I don't want that to continue. I have enough clients that I can handle all the business, but I can't necessarily handle all that business while bringing in lots of new clients, because that is very labor intensive. So I have to filter somehow, and it makes mathematically good sense to filter and allow the people that have bigger portfolios and not the ones that have smaller portfolios. So if you still have questions, you can still email me, and I can call you, and we can chat, and it might be 15 or 20 minutes. It might be half an hour, and I can give you some pointers and suggestions and ideas of where to go. And, of course, you can continue to listen to the show and get great ideas and suggestions. But, of course, do your own research. Don't take anything I say as specific investment advice to you. So if you have under $250,000, you may still contact me. And if you would do me the favor of letting me know it's under $250,000, not so that I can ignore you. That's not my intention, but so that I know that you're probably not going to be a client, and we can just have a polite conversation. You ask me whatever you want to ask me. I'll help you out where I can. And at some point, if I get too busy and I can't even do that, I'll announce that, and you'll just have to listen to the show. But for right now, I can still do that, but I can't go through the whole process of learning all the information I need to know and setting up all the accounts and working with all the forms. if you have under $250,000. And it's great for Phil, right? But not really what I wanted to do. So I could have worse problems. And I've had worse problems, and I'll probably have worse problems in the future. But for now, that's kind of where things are. The phenomenal success of the show has used up my time, and I just can't do more. I'm so sorry. So anyway, we're going to talk about some of the trips I'm going to take here, and just continue on with our ending segment here. On March 19th, oh gosh, now let me double check here. Yes, March 19th, I will be appearing as a co-host on The Atheist Experience. The atheist community of Austin has the world's largest TV show about atheism, promoting positive atheism, and they have on religious people most of the time and asking them what do they believe and why. It is my favorite podcast. I'm trying to think. There's others that I love, of course. Cara Santa Maria, who we had on recently, Skeptic's Guide to the Universe, and a lot of the regular atheist podcasts, Thinking Atheist and so on. Great shows, but the atheist community of Austin has on religious people, and they try to explain what they believe and why. And sometimes it's hilarious. Sometimes it's fucking sad because people can't think their way out of a paper bag. Other times it can be a little annoying, but on the whole, I enjoy it, and I've learned an awful lot from all of the hosts. So hopefully I can hold my own. I'm not sure how well I'm going to do with arguing with people on the phone. That's not my strong suit, but hopefully it's an enjoyable time. That's March 19th. It will be streamed live. You can check out Google Atheist Experience or Atheist Community of Austin, and you can find out. But it will also be in podcast form after the fact. So please do check that out. And then, of course, another reminder that in late March, on the 29th, I am flying out to Philadelphia. I will be giving talks in and around that area. And I will be in Washington for the Washington Area Secular Humanists on the 31st. It will be in Rockville, Maryland at the Washington Area Executive Office Building Auditorium. So hopefully if you're in that area in Rockville, Maryland, you know where that is. It's a little bit north, and if I recall correctly, a skosh west of Washington, D.C. So that'll be the 31st at 6 p.m. On April Fool's Day. Sounds like great fun. I will be in York, Pennsylvania, and I will be talking to the PA non-believers in York, Pennsylvania, and that is at the UU, the Unitarian Universalists in York, Pennsylvania, and that is at 10 a.m. April 1st. So please feel free to visit me there. And then on Sunday the 2nd, I have two talks. The first one is also, I have 9:30, but I think it starts at 10. It might be so that I make sure I get there early. That'll be an investing skeptically topic. That is with the Lehigh Valley Humanists in Allentown. So you can Google there and check that out. I show it is going to be at the Bradbury Sullivan LGBT Center. So please come see me there. And then that day, of course, Sunday, I have a second talk, and I have to drive over to New Jersey for the South Jersey Humanists. And that title is of the talk is Breaking the Cycle, and that's how to get your children or children you may know out of religion. And I'm pretty sure that is in the UU Center there, and it is 75 Pomona Road in Egg Harbor City. So that is the second. And then I end my fancy tour on the 3rd with a talk in Philadelphia, and that will be at 5 South Bryn Mawr. And I know I probably slaughtered the name, so forgive me, but that will be in Philadelphia. And the nice thing about it is the day or two after, I'm going to visit Philly, and the day before, I am going to visit Washington, D.C. So if you're in the area around that time frame, let me know. Send me a note, phil@polarisfinancialplanning.com, and maybe you can join me. Maybe I'll have a few friends. Maybe I'll be going solo. I haven't quite figured that out yet. I have a couple of weeks still, so looking forward to that. So once again,
thank you for listening to the Phil Ferguson Show, and I do hope to see you out at a conference or at a talk. Until then, ciao